But Brian Kelly's staff is now set with Cortez Hankton. And Jake, when I look at this staff, top to bottom, what I see is Brian Kelly kind of creating almost a small council of sorts with chief lieutenants that he knows very well, right? I would throw Denbrock in here, and these are normally kind of very proven guys, right? If not the most sexy. But I would throw Denbrock in there. I would definitely throw Brian Poling in there. I would actually throw Frank Wilson in there, even though he's not a Brian Kelly guy, but he's in that core small council of salty veteran chief lieutenants. And it seems like underneath that, they've done a really good job of then giving those guys assistants that are young, up-and-comers, a couple potential plays in there, and then kind of Louisiana talent scattered throughout. I think 4 of the 10 coaches, the actual on-field coaches, ends up having Louisiana ties. But as Brody and others have written about, in the shadow staff, it's almost all Louisiana. Like in the behind-the-scenes recruiting staff, it is almost all Louisiana. But as far as the staff itself is concerned, I do love this makeup where you have the core pillars of experienced guys, and then you're taking some shots underneath them with some guys that can maybe end up being very good.
Yeah, and so offensively, you bring in, so obviously Mike Denbrock is offensive coordinator experience, done it many, many years. You also bring in Frank Wilson, who's been a head coach. You bring in Hankton, who's been a passing game coordinator. You bring in Joe Sloan, who's been an offensive coordinator at Louisiana Tech, and Brad Davis has been an interim head coach.
Yeah.
Like, that's your offensive staff. So you have plenty of experience in other areas, and you have guys who have called plays. You have guys who have designed, passing concepts like Hankton. Obviously, Frank Wilson has put a game plan together being a head coach. So offensively, if we're just going one side of the ball right now, that's the thing that kind of just flashes at me is you're bringing in a lot of experience. You're going to try to mold a bunch of different ideas together to try to create what this offense is going to be.
Yeah, Brody Miller closed out his kind of offensive portion of his breakdown of the staff at theathletic.com. You should go check it out. He says, quote, "Though fans may be unsure what to make of Denbrock, because, again, Denbrock not sexy, very solid. Though fans
I've never seen him in person.
Though fans, I think actually physically that does kind of apply to him as well, right? Like he's a thick, solid dude. He's like a granite man a little bit. Though fans may be unsure what to make of Denbrock, each of these hires are coups for LSU. I mean, again, you get Cortez Hankton to leave the Natty champion team, come to a team that just finished last in the SEC and taking the same job. And Joe Sloan, you have someone that you can almost feel them maybe grooming him a little bit. A young guy who has not just Louisiana ties and North Louisiana specifically, but who has worked his way up to play caller, to OC. And then in Brad Davis, yes, another young offensive line coach that is very proven already for his time and now has things like interim title. But more importantly, just look at the improvement that he did with the LSU offensive line last year. So as you prepare to enter a decade of Brian Kelly, you have pieces, young pieces, kind of under the underboss that could develop within that decade, right? Does Joe Sloan one day take over for a Denbrock or something? Like, it's entirely possible. And then defensively, it's a bit more interesting where I don't know that you have a Denbrock parallel on the defense because you've actually, like, one of the up-and-comers is your DC in Matt House. You're giving him, not that he's been an SC coordinator before, but you're giving him a bigger opportunity than he's been given yet in his career.
Yeah, so a couple of notes about some of the guys, and I want to start with Sloan. I believe he actually interviewed for the Louisiana Monroe head job when Bowden got that job. So he's already kind of thought of maybe in that mold of being pretty close to taking a job like that. When you go back and you look at some of the offenses they had at Louisiana Tech, you're talking about not only some of the best in their conference, some of the best in the country. And he's also somebody that they tagged after they fired Skip Holtz to be their interim head coach. Now, it didn't last for very long because he went and took the job, obviously, with LSU. But to get him to be just a quarterback's coach, and I don't say that with any disrespect, but to get him just to be your quarterback's coach and not have to make him a coordinator of any kind, that's a big get for LSU. And it kind of shows that he wants to prove that he can do it on a Power 5, bigger level. He's a player at East Carolina. He's been at South Florida. He's been at other places, and certainly he's been at Louisiana Tech for a long time. So the part of him knowing the state and all of that, but he's kind of ready to make a jump, but he wanted to come to LSU to be the quarterback's coach. And so this is somebody that I'll be paying attention to. I wonder how much he'll be involved in the game plan and putting things together. Obviously, working with the quarterbacks and not being the offensive coordinator is not something that you typically see. Like Denbrock being the tight ends coach, when LSU hasn't had a true tight ends coach since Insminger.
Wow.
They've had like a GA or analyst or whatever it might have been, kind of a shadow staff member handle the tight ends. Now your OC is going to be the tight ends coach in a room that we don't really know what that room's going to look like.
Well, yeah, look, I think division of responsibilities is going to be fascinating on multiple levels. I mean, Brian Kelly used to be a play caller in his career. Now he hasn't called the past few years, and I have to imagine that Denbrock would probably be the play caller here, but like Cortez Hankton's the passing game coordinator. Is anybody have the run game coordinator title? Is it Denbrock? Do we know?
No, nobody does. Frank has assistant head coach, and he's the running backs coach, but that's the only additional title.
So either way, it has the feeling of a room that is obviously going to be very collaborative in game planning, but I do feel that the ultimate buck probably stops with Denbrock, right? And then maybe like almost behind the scenes, Denbrock and Kelly can kind of work, like, yeah, I think, Mike, I think I would, maybe we lean here a little bit, maybe we lean here, but I'll be fascinated to see how it all plays out on that side of the ball. And then, like we said, defensively, Matt House at DC it's not high risk, but it's not the known factor that the Denbrock-Kelly tandem is either, but it does look like the potential to be very exciting. With him already having a very successful track record at Kentucky, he's been great in Kansas City, working with their linebackers. You all know what Tyron said. And look, man, he has a lot of pressure on him. Can you get this LSU defense back to being feared, back to being scary? Back to, I mean, maybe you're never going to get back to where you were back in like the Glenn Dorsey days and stuff, but can you kind of be thought of, not like this last year's Georgia defense that feels like an outlier, but kind of in that same vein? I guess the bottom line is, can you feel like you're bullying people once again?
Yeah, obviously you mentioned like Glenn Dorsey and that defense, but I'd say even more so your defense in 11. Like, obviously, like, that was a defense that you feared. You didn't want to play that defense.
Yeah.
That defense was coming. They were hitting you, right in the face, and they were doing whatever they wanted to because they were the aggressor. They never really counterpunched, right? Brandon Taylor and Honey Badger and, everybody. Like, you go down the list of all the guys you had on that defense, and it was a defense that was feared. You knew you played LSU, and it has been a while since you've been able to have that.
Yeah, and even something like the 2019 defense, right? I guess it's stepping stones. You want to get back to like kind of that level first, but obviously you'd probably even want to go a bit beyond that, though. The 2019 defense really did get elite by the end. It just took some growing pains at first. All right, so look, I do have a lot more thoughts on the staff, and we'll continue to kind of revisit those throughout the show. Keep it locked right here as we close out hour number 1 next here on OT.